When the winter winds are blown away and warm spring sunshine's here to stay, sap starts creeping up the tree to make a treat for you and me, and it tastes
so good.
How good?
So good.
Real good?
So good.
It's maple syrup and it tastes
so good.
How good?
So good.
Real good?
So good.
It's maple syrup.
I've been doing this for approximately 35 years. My neighbor and I started on a rig that we made ourselves out of an old oil drum, and we did it outside. And then 25 years ago, I bought the second-hand evaporator that I have over in the sugar house now, and we've been over there for 25 years. It's a really comfortable place. I enjoy it because the kids helped build it. Neighborhood kids were over there all the time. They used to come over and do their homework, and it was nice and warm, and it smelled good, and they had a great time and formed a little singing group called the Sugar House Sweeties.
Maybe we can get a film of that too.
It takes about 40 gallons of sap when you start out the season to make a gallon of syrup. And each tap, you assume by the end of the year, will allow you to make about a quart of maple syrup. This year the sap is not as heavy with sugar as it has been in past years. So the last time that I boiled, it took approximately 60 gallons to make 1 gallon of syrup. Normally, as the season progresses, the amount of sugar in the sap decreases, and sometimes at the end of the year you get up to a pretty high ratio. Sometimes up to almost 80 to 1. At that point it's time to stop. There are two kinds of taps that we can use to tap the trees. The older type, which is this one, and it's set up so that you can hang the bucket off the hook, is a little larger than the newer types, which are less injurious to the trees, and you can hang the bucket right off the tap. We're going to use the older type tap on this particular tree. If you want to hold that for a minute, Bridget. When you drill the tree, you want to put it in at a slight angle so that the sap runs out nicely into the bucket, and you want to tap in through the bark, and the recommendation for how far you go in varies from 1 to a couple inches. I usually go about 1 inch or maybe 1.5 inches. And that seems to work very well on the trees here. So that's what we'll do on this particular tap. When you're drilling in, you can tell if you've got a good part of the tree because the part that comes out is white and nice and clean. Sometimes you hit a point in the tree where there's a little rot and it comes out darker, and it's probably a good idea to retap if that happens. So the hole's now drilled, and we'll put in this tap. This is a little device you just put into the tap so that it doesn't get all mashed up when you're hitting it in with the hammer. And you tap it in until it's tight. And you then hang the bucket on the hook and put on the top to keep the rain and the snow out. And you hope in a day or so you have a full bucket. That's the process. It's fairly simple, and you can go fairly fast if you have somebody helping you carrying the buckets and the tops and things. Okay, once we collect the sap, we take it in back of the sugar house and use a pump to pump it up to a large tank that's behind that particular wall. From that tank, it flows through the tubes that you see over there, and there's one valve that allows it to come down from the tank. It flows into a small container over there that has a float valve in it that regulates the level of the sap as it comes into this back tank. It comes through that back box, then through a long tube down this way and out of the tube there, and then as the sap gets heavier from being heated and the water being driven off, it moves down to that end of the evaporator, through a hole up there, then down to this end, where it comes through this valve into this portion of the evaporator, which has another float valve, which regulates the level of the sap in the finishing tank. And the same thing happens in the finishing tank as in this tank. It moves as it gets heavier through the tank up to the opposite side where it goes into the small container over there. And from there, when it's finished, you can open a valve and we put it through a series of, what do we put it through, Tim? Filters that fit in that container over there behind Tim. And that's how you get all the nasty stuff, all the junk out of the sap, out of this, what's now syrup. We know it's syrup because Bridget can get that out of that up there. We measure the specific gravity of the syrup with that hydrometer, and when it reaches sinks to the top red line, that's when it's legally maple syrup. So we keep doing that as it comes off, so we stop pulling it off the evaporator when it reaches that point. It goes below that point, actually.
So this is the very simple system we use to kind of test the grade of the maple syrup and the color. And it starts off with the very lightest, which is light amber, and that has the subtlest flavor of maple syrup. And then it moves up to the medium amber, which is a grade A medium amber, which is a little bit darker. And then in the middle here, we would pour in the maple syrup that we just made to be able to test where it falls in the range. And then you move up to still grade A, but a dark amber, which has a stronger maple flavor. And then finally to a grade B, which is even darker, and a lot of people use for cooking, but it has a very strong maple flavor, and some people still like to use it on pancakes or French toast because it has the strongest flavor.
It's good to have people who like to help when you're out collecting because we haul the sap by buckets into a tank in our truck and then pump it up into the sugar house, and it takes quite a long time to do it alone, but if you have a couple people helping, it cuts way down. The other thing that's nice about it is you get to be outside in March and February, and there's not a whole lot else you can do during that time of the year. Usually in late March or February.
Get that camera out of here.
Take that, Snoopy camera.
We do the paparazzi.
Reggie, you can hook it. There's a hook on it.
Yeah, there's a hook.